the.
No, I've got who's in attendance on the planning commission. I have to write down some, Peter Eastburn or Eisenburn Brown. I have to put him in and a few others, but I was hoping that we'd have this being recorded and we just take it off of that.
Yeah, that works too.
You're on, young man. Go ahead.
All right, we'll start over. Call the Franklin Township Planning Commission meeting November 4th. Call to order at 7:04. In attendance, we'll just say that the 5 planning commissioners are in attendance, and we'll get the rest of the attendance off the recording or from who's checked in on Zoom. I want to welcome Sarah to the township. And first order of business is any public comment. Next order of business is approval. I think it was the August minute.
Yeah, I went through the minutes, I signed them. I didn't attend the meeting, as you know, but from what I understand, that represented the meeting content.
I didn't attend as well, John. So did anybody that was there feel the minutes are appropriate?
I feel they're accurate. I make a motion to pass the minutes as written for August.
I'll second it.
Great. All in favor of August minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any nays? All right. Next order of business, I guess we'll hear from the charter school. And I guess is it Dan? Will you be?
Yes, I'm the civil engineer for the project. And then Donna Archer is present, Ian Curry and Kristen Bishop, all from the Avon Grove Charter School District.
So I'll let you present in more detail, but this was brought up over the last week or so that the charter school is asking for our recommendation for a preliminary final plan instead of going through a preliminary land development and then a final land development for parking that was originally to be in the original plan when they did the expansion pervious and now is being proposed impervious. And I'll let Dan take it from here.
Yeah, thank you. And Donna, I don't know if you want to give a little introduction first, just, the need for this and kind of the evolution of the project.
Great. Dan, thank you so very much. First, I want to thank the Franklin Township Planning Commission for allowing us to attend. Our purpose in meeting, we had a Zoom call last week, was to share some of our information with regards to the Campbellsville campus and the parking that we had originally planned in the land development to be impervious in the front of the school, and our concern that even with the impervious or pavers that it might just not be adequate. So as the school is looking at improvements to both sites, parking was one of the areas that we had wanted to address this year. So it's not that we're adding students or bringing more teachers in. We do have service providers coming throughout the day, delivering new services to students. Some of these services are driven by, some of the learning loss that occurred during the COVID pandemic and the school shutdowns. So given the fact that we do have changing traffic throughout the day, the administration had reached out to our project manager and our civil engineer to look at the front of the school and see if there was a way that we could make the temporary parking a more permanent solution. So one, that it would look better, the area would be well kept, and kind of what would that look like? What room would we have? How many spaces could we get? So once the final sketches were done, original conversations, we had a call with Jeff Eastburn and a member of your committee to review our initial planning to see if there was anything specific that we needed to include, something that we would be prohibited. And we really wanted to get the township's insight into this project as we were pushing through the schematic and the design in hopes of working, of doing the parking lot sooner rather than later so that we keep the appearance of the front of the school in good condition. So with that being said, Dan Meyer, he is our civil engineer. He's worked with the charter school for many, many years. He was involved with the original purchase and the renovation. We were very happy that he was available to work with us on this. And then Jared Heckendorn, who is with Hooper Shiles Architects, is our project manager. He is unavailable to make the call this evening, but readily available and was able to participate in the call the other day. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dan Meyer. And Dan, it's all on you. Thank you.
All right. Hey, Jeff, am I able to click share screen here and get something on everyone's screen?
Sure, just give me a minute, sir.
All right.
You are good to go.
All right. All right. Does everybody see a plan with the whole site on there and a bunch of tables and notes around it?
No,
No,
Oh, hang on. Missed one button. How about now?
There
yes,
you go.
Okay. So I wanted to just bring this up first, just to kind of orient everyone. We've got New London Road, Route 896 down the right side. Across the top is Peacedale Road. Back in sort of 2007, 2008 timeframe, Peacedale Road was realigned because there's sort of a sharp drop off right here, and there was really bad sight distance for cars coming out at this location. The school added in this bus drop off loop with some parking here. This is the existing school building. They did add some parking to the original parking lot in this area. And then in the approvals were sort of the 2017, 2018 time frame, and then construction in 2018, 2019. This is the new addition. And then there are just, some play areas associated with that, some stormwater features. So what we're looking at now is down in this area. And this was actually, I believe, I have a note on the plan, approved in 2009 by the township to have an overflow parking area. At that time, it was approved to be sort of a porous, I won't say porous pavement. It was more like one of those grass paver systems, right? Sort of the plastic grid that you can grow grass in, but the vehicles can drive on it and support the vehicles. So really where we're at now, switching pictures here. So here again is the existing school. Here's Peacedale Road with the S curve, 896 down the side. So what we're looking at now is down in this area to come off the bus loop with a driveway. Right now we're showing 39 parking spaces here. These are 10-foot by 20-foot spaces. Your ordinance does allow 9 by 18. We may opt to make some of those 9 by 18s. This was really just sort of the first look at this. The stormwater, we would put some sort of subsurface system under the parking lot. We would have inlets in the grass. Our idea is to not curb this, which is similar to what's done around the campus. There's no curb along these parking spaces. And the idea is that you have a grass swale off the edge of the pavement. And so, in very light rains, you may not even get water into this system. They'll just flow into the grass and soak into the ground, which is a good thing. Let me just zoom out here again. And then that system would have an overflow that would come up to an existing inlet in the shoulder of New London Road, which then discharges under the road into a swale here and makes its way. So, we're really just looking to get input on the configuration of this. We would be looking to comply with with all the township's ordinances related to it, landscaping, lighting. One of the things that we'd be looking for discussion on is the setbacks. There is an ordinance section about a 30-foot buffer. So we've maintained that here with the adjoining property. I did see two somewhat conflicting ordinances. One talked about parking having to be 10 feet from the right of way of any public streets, but then there is still that statement about a 30-foot buffer. So, it's possible that maybe these spaces here can't be constructed. All right, and we would lose some spaces. There might be a possibility to get maybe 3 parallel parking spaces along here, and still provide the necessary width there. I think that's kind of an overview. I'll have some questions, sort of procedural questions, but I'm happy to first take any sort of project specific questions anyone might have.
This is John Gontar as a question. You have potential overflow going out to a swale. The system you're putting in, what year rain is it designed to handle?
Well, we haven't designed it yet, but it would be within compliance with the township ordinances. So we'd be infiltrating the net increase of the 2-year storm and then managing the rate for up to the 100-year storm.
Hi, this is Dave Hoffman. What waivers do you anticipate, if any?
Yeah, let me pull up this
final-
other plan, and I'll preface it saying, we haven't done a full ordinance review. This is the plan, sort of the very early on plan, when this addition was being proposed and an expansion of the parking. And so I'm going to zoom in down here. These were the ordinances we requested at that time in 2017. And, I'll quickly run through these without getting into details. This first one is just about pipes being constructed of concrete pipe. We would propose to do that anywhere we were going under a driveway or through a right of way. But the rest of the piping, we would request to use the high density polyethylene pipe. That would be privately owned by the school. This one was about a minimum pipe size. We don't have an issue with complying with that. This was needed on the other project because there were some existing 12-inch pipes and it didn't make sense to send a 15-inch pipe into an existing 12-inch pipe. Here's a sort of a doubling up. Here's another one about the pipes being reinforced concrete. So similar to the first one. This one is about cut and fill slopes not being steeper than 4-to-1. We did have some 3-to-1 slopes on the previous project, but we're in a very flat area up along the road there. We're not going to be having any slopes even close to that. So we don't need to ask for that. This one was about providing profile sheets for the storm pipes. And we requested a waiver because we were not crossing any other utilities, so there was no concern about conflicts. This will just have those few short runs and the one long run to the existing inlet, so we don't have any problem with providing those profiles in this project. Here's the one about the preliminary plan, and that requested a waiver that and to do preliminary final, which you can see here we were permitted to do that on that bigger project. We're not so much opposed to going in as 2 separate ones. It's just that the school is still hoping that they may be able to get all this approved and then constructed this summer so that it's ready for the beginning of the 22-23 school year. So that's the purpose of the request. It's not to somehow, avoid meetings or any sort of process that's typical. It's really about a time crunch because of the school schedule. This next one was granted the last time, a requirement that wells and sewage drainage fields within 100 feet of the property be shown. There were no wells or sewage fields within 100 feet. So, we asked for the waiver from that and would do so again. This one here on the previous project was about replacement trees. And if you recall, zoom out again quick. The school ended up doing a really neat reforestation project down here. I forget how many trees, dozens of trees down here.
333, Dan.
233, great. So, that was really just sort of basically looking for some relief of the planting requirements up in the campus as I remember it, just to keep areas open for play and visibility and things like that. And then, it was more than compensated for by the reforestation effort down there. In this case, I haven't researched it yet, but I don't see why we wouldn't be able to comply with the landscaping requirements in the parking area per the ordinances. And then the last one was the requirement to submit an environmental impact assessment. And that was also granted, and really the basis was that there was not going to be any change in use. So we didn't need to sort of analyze, what's the impact of this use on the community because it's not changing. So we would again ask for that waiver. And again, this is without me going through the ordinances a whole other time, but from this project, we had parking and these are the waivers we needed. We're not doing any building now. So my hunch is this is probably the list. As far as we know, we don't need any sort of waiver or variances. Whatever setbacks may be required, we'll comply with those.
All right, thanks, Dan. Just to get an overview, obviously we'll go in more detail when you submit a plan.
Sure.
What involvement do you need from PennDOT?
So I've contacted the traffic consulting firm, Traffic Planning and Design. They're the ones that did the design of this realignment and got the highway occupancy permit for everything. And then another engineering firm, Gilmore Associates, prepared the right-of-way plans for the improvements that were made out here, right? There's now a left turn lane into Peacedale here and, just that sort of striping and arrows and the only signs and that sort of stuff. So in speaking with the traffic consultant, he doesn't think this parking would warrant any special traffic study to PennDOT. Really the only thing that would be required, and I'll jump back to this other plan, is that, we'll now be discharging stormwater into an inlet and a pipe that's in the PennDOT right of way. I will point out that this whole area right now generally drains in this direction and, gets to the gutter of the street and makes its way into that inlet. So once we've put this system in, there'll be less runoff running in the gutter. It'll be piped to this and it'll be at a rate that is lower than what is getting there now in accordance with the township ordinances and PennDOT requirements. The only other thing with PennDOT, and this is one of my questions on my list. So there was a new right-of-way delineated for this road, for the realigned road. And then I believe this right-of-way was widened a little bit on this side to make room for that center turning lane. And what I don't know is if all those rights of way were ever recorded and, dedicated to the township for Peacedale Road, dedicated to PennDOT for New London Road. That's something I'm in the midst of trying to research. So, Jeff, I'll be reaching out to you offline in the next week or so to see if you have any information on that.
Got it.
Yeah. Dave Hoffman again. The one reason I brought up about PennDOT, I was hoping this might be an opportunity to correct the lines on 896 that don't show the intersection of McMaster and 896. I know that's not a function of the school doing anything wrong. It was what PennDOT wanted to do as far as the lines on 896, and the supervisors at the time didn't care to address it with PennDOT. But I think it's kind of the amount of traffic that goes in and out of McMaster Boulevard on the 896. The striping on the road should be corrected. I make that as much of a public note that maybe the township wants to send it back to PennDOT if we need to be addressing any traffic on 896 associated with this project.
We're not
Just-
looking to increase any traffic during the day. And again, we're looking, and we could be utilizing the back parking lot for a lot of the service contractors that are coming in. But the way we're queuing the cars for parents to pick up students, and there is an increase in volume because of COVID and parents, not wanting to put their children on the bus. So this is kind of a solution for that and for long-term going forward. Where is McMaster Road? I'm sorry, I live in Oxford. I've been working for the school for 16 years, but don't get out much. Where exactly is McMaster?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. Is that somewhere down this direction?
No, it's right across the street from the school. Right there, about
Oh,
where,
okay. I thought that was just a driveway.
And-
Okay.
and the lines on 896 are solid across that intersection.
Okay.
And the
Okay.
striping, the crossroads striping starts there. I understand the traffic patterns for the school won't change, but overall public safety has changed since this original school plan, with the addition of the additional preschool, not preschool, but ducklings.
Daycare?
The daycare, correct. So there's a lot of traffic in that area now. And, PennDOT should at least consider making the road markings correct.
Right, and so that would fall on the charter school?
No, I would-
To remedy?
I don't see how it would, but
Okay.
if there's conversations between our traffic consultants, the township and PennDOT, I think it behooves the township to mention that it was blind in error the first time.
Right, that definitely makes sense, for sure.
Make a note of that, Mr. Eisenbrand, please.
Dan,
Dave, this is Poliasi. If I can just jump in here, I'd point out that all of this that you're talking about should be considered in light of the 896 safety improvement project that PennDOT has on the bulletin board, on its, not bulletin, drawing boards, which is, I think, really in the right-of-way acquisition phase now and pretty much set in stone. And I was trying to see if I could find the McMaster intersection, but I can't. But any discussion with PennDOT should take place in light of that. I just point that out.
All right. Thanks for that. I was not aware of that. I mean,
Yeah.
these improvement projects, they often pop up on my projects. They may be anywhere from a year out to who knows when out, but we can definitely reach out to PennDOT, and I'll probably go through the traffic consultant. They tend to have the inside scoop on the progress of those kinds of things. But
Well,
we'll
is
look into it.
Is McMaster Boulevard really across from the school? I think it looks more like it's across from that Daddy-O's Takeout. It looks like it's just beyond the school boundary.
Yeah, if it's this, right, that's the southern school property line right here.
Yeah, it might
And
just,
I believe there's a gas station right here. if I'm
Yeah.
correct.
That's further up.
Right. And I don't bring it up to prolong this meeting and obviously I've stated it's not on the school to correct that.
Right.
But I'm glad I brought it up and that Paul's reminding everybody that there is this 896 improvement project.
Right. Right. This is Chuck Phillips. I think we need to know, Dan, we need you to reach out to PennDOT to make sure that there are no changes in front of the school, because that's been in the works for a long time and it's going to happen. The inertia is there.
Okay, absolutely. I'll be reaching out.
Just another quick note. I did find on my computer a page, Dave, and it looks like they've got a solid line there still in their plans, just for reference. I don't know if I'm looking at the final plan or not, but the copy I have shows a solid line in front of McMaster.
Okay.
Dan, how close are you
So
to
what do you
the,
think, guys? Preliminary, final, or preliminary?
I had one more question for Dan. How close are you to the building?
Bring this other one up here. So this line here is the building. Then there's, I think that's maybe a 4-foot wide sidewalk or so. So we're probably about, this might be 8 to 12 feet. I don't have it. I can't really, well, actually, this is 10 feet right here, right? The width of this parking space.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's 9 feet. Looks like it's maybe just a hair narrower.
Okay.
And one option would be to make these spaces the 9x18s, right? And we gain another 2 feet there. If there's a requirement. I didn't check yet. Is there an ordinance requirement about separation of parking from a building?
Yeah, and I'm also just thinking about carbon monoxide. There are operable windows there.
Mm.
Okay. I guess the only other question I have before asking the planning commission is, Pete Eisenbrown shared an email earlier, and I don't think your opinions changed, Pete, as far as you thought that this could be reviewed quite easily as a preliminary final.
Yeah, that's correct. When you look at the plan before, as Dan pointed out, I'll say the addition, and a lot of you were present for that, the addition, the stormwater, and the parking lot expansion was allowed to be a combined preliminary final. So since this is just a smaller parking lot that's always been on the planning stages and on the paper, as I'll call it, I certainly see no reason why this can't be considered as the combination. It'll just make it go a little quicker. They'll still go through the same process at the end of the day.
Right, and our intention would be we're going to resurvey most of this area, anything that we're impacting, so we're sure, we're lining up with everything correctly. And then, we would be designing full grading, full stormwater management, full erosion and sediment control for that first submission, right? We're not going to sort of put in something that's not completely engineered, so that your township engineer could do a thorough review on the first submission.
Okay, great. I don't think this requires a vote as much as us giving you our general opinion. I'm in favor of having a preliminary final plan. How does the rest of the planning commission feel?
I feel it's the same as we always say. As long as all the information is there, we're good.
John Gontars, I agree.
Same, I agree.
And Mark's on mute. Well, you got at least 4 of us, or maybe I missed Mark. So yeah, we'd be in favor of that.
I'm in favor.
All right, you have 5 out of the 5 of us.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
need anything else from us tonight, or?
Well, Dan,
I don't,
if I can say one thing, Dave.
Yeah.
With the discussion with the PennDOT, is there any right-of-way take that they are planning for the 896 project that would impact you guys? And I'm not familiar enough with that plan from PennDOT to know what right-of-way they may be taking where.
We haven't received any notifications or communications from PennDOT about any kind of taking or with regard to the sidewalk or the improvements. We haven't heard. And actually, when we had the call last week, that was the first time in a while that I had heard about it. So it was back in the top of my mind that we should be hearing something soon. But to date, we haven't received or heard anything.
Okay, well, somewhere on the design plans or the latest plans that probably the township has, and maybe Jeff, it sounds like Paul was looking at them, but I'm sure Jeff has them. We can find the sheet hopefully together that depicts the school area and McMaster, and then get everybody on the same page as to at least what they're showing right now. Maybe there is no impact, but I think we ought to know that going into this.
What I'll end up doing is I'll put Dan in contact with the right person at PennDOT who's headed up this project for the expansion.
Yep, that sounds like a good plan.
That'd be very helpful, Jeff, thanks.
Very helpful. Thanks so much, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay.
all right.
All right,
Thank you.
all right.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night,
Have a great
everyone. Thank
night.
you.
All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the green ordinance. It's quite different than what we reviewed, and I don't even remember when we reviewed the previous ordinance. So does Pete or Dave want to give us the up-to-date on how the green energy alternative ordinance has gotten to this draft point?
So I don't know if Pete or I could talk about this, but at a very high level, what was done, it was taken from existing ordinances, existing township ordinances, and adapted to what we felt Franklin would need. And so that was the long and short of it. We wanted to revisit and take a little bit of time and just have the PC go through it and see if there's anything glaring, anything missing, any concerns before we institute the green ordinance. So idea was it was taken from existing ordinances, we compiled it, and before the board had looked at it and made some notes, and then we said, well, we should bring it in front of the PC for quotes final approval before we go ahead and approve it, just to make sure that there isn't anything glaring. I don't know if Pete or Jeff have anything to add to that, but that's basically the gist.
Yeah, the short version that I can add is this is something I think I had originally started, it seems like quite a long time ago, Dave. Then Jeff Vogels was involved with it a little bit. And then I think there was some feedback from, it was maybe just floated around at a supervisor's meeting or two where there's some feedback. So Joan had been working this in the last couple of months there. So this September 2021 version that you have kind of, I think, addresses all these staff level comments, as I'll call it.
Yeah.
And is hopefully in a form that's pretty close to what you guys are looking for. So that's what I can add to it right now, at least on a high level.
Okay, thank you. So, not that I am complaining that we're limited to a single meeting review, Typically, we don't have that restraint placed on us, but
Well, I guess we should, let me just add it this way. I think if you find some glaring issues and we need to work on it, maybe the board can talk about having more time. I guess that's how I would say that. I don't think there's any. My personal feeling is I don't know why there'd be a rush. It's not like we have a list of residents waiting for solar panel arrays. So I don't know if I wouldn't be opposed to approaching the board and saying, hey, the PC really needs another month to look at this thing. So if you feel strongly about that, I'm okay.
well, I mean, with that being said, maybe we'll look at it a little differently instead of going through definitions and seeing. I'll bring up at least one typo I saw in definitions, but what is the planning commission's read and feel on the ordinance?
Want me to start off?
Sure.
Well, the whole section about building monster 10-foot high structures without concrete is going to be very difficult. So I think if we pass the ordinance, it's just basically going to eliminate any solar panels in the township. And I hope, I mean, I don't know if that's the intention, that's what will happen. I shot a picture over, that's the picture I shot around to everybody was Longwood Gardens. You know, the bottom of their panels are 2 feet off the ground. They don't have any erosion problems. These guys know a little bit about groundwater. It would just any solar panels in our township would just cost so much that people would not, they would just go elsewhere, which is unfortunate to our landowners.
So what's the suggested revision?
Was there a huge concern for having solar panels in the township?
No, I don't think so. We're not trying to preclude solar panels in the township at all.
Okay.
No.
So, I mean,
So my personal view is we want people to be able to put panels up, right? We want people to have a clear understanding of what they need to do. We want it to be reasonable and not put undue restrictions on them, right? So that's kind of my perspective. So if you find something that says, well, wait a minute, this line here means they can't actually build a solar panel, then we have to change it, right? If it means that you're creating a rule that would make the construction of a solar panel impossible, then clearly that's a unreasonable ordinance, right? And I think that's what you're saying, Chuck, right?
That is what I'm saying. Yes.
Yeah. So we don't want that. That's not something that we want.
so it just questions as much out of ignorance because those solar panels on Greenwood Road were placed how long ago? And has the technology changed that they can be placed without concrete? I'm asking if we did pull this ordinance or piece this ordinance from other townships that have seen solar panels go in under this similar type ordinance that they've had. Do we know where these ordinances came from?
I think it was a combination of other ordinances, and I know Joan had talked with some of the other townships on that. So I think on the foundation design, the intention was to use helical anchors, and the concept was that the farmland, while it's farmland today, if you had extensive earthwork and foundation structures, you would be ruining the land when you would go to decommission these at some point in the future. So the concept is with these helical anchors, you would just screw them into the ground. You could simply remove all the above ground features, then unscrew these anchors. And for the most part, the land is the way it was. If you pour concrete, it's going to be very difficult to remove and really render the farmland useless at some point down the line. And the other, just I'll say, global concept was the individual property solar energy system is whether you're residential, commercial, or industrial, and you just want to put something out to generate enough electricity, hopefully to defray your costs, be that a homeowner, be that a Walmart. Again, if you want to cover your existing roof, there's no issue. When you get on the ground, there are some concerns with that. But then the concern, you start, a lot of municipalities are getting calls these days for the large scale solar energy fields that are coming in. So it's either you can have some rules to try to guide that within your township, or they can just do what they want and if you don't have an ordinance.
So Pete, what you're saying, people who are interested in building solar panels have options outside of concrete slabs.
Yeah.
So I think now that you've, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. What was your?
No, yes, that's
Yes,
correct.
okay. And that actually rang my, I remember now the conversation about using the alternative bases so we don't disrupt permanently open farmland. So I guess that's the concept, Chuck, is having the alternative bases that exist are preferable and likely wouldn't chase large scale installations.
Yeah, what's going to chase the large scale installations is E5E. Lowest vertical clearance of a solar array shall be 10 feet or less. All right, so I misread this. So we're saying we're limiting the bottom of it to less than 10 feet?
I'll need to.
That seems to contradict itself.
Let me check with that again. This ties in with the whole DEP concept and stormwater, and there's two schools of thought on this. DEP has an FAQ paper out, and I think we had talked about this a year or two ago. It seems that long ago. And while it's how far the panels are spaced apart and things like that, and how much that would impact runoff and how DEP looks at this. I look at it a little bit different than DEP. So for a small system for mom and pop, I do not see an issue, assuming you gap the panels enough and the water doesn't run from one panel to another. I don't know that that occurs in reality, but that's what should be happening, like 2 or 3 inches of gap, not 1/8 of an inch that you probably see in reality. So I think we can deal with that. The other problem is nothing usually wants to grow under these. So we had a discussion about the idea to put stone underneath there at some point, and then that was kicked around by the board. But when we get into the commercial systems, the large scale systems, I'm going to disagree with DEP and say they are impervious cover, and we need to have a stormwater design for that. You could put yourself in a position of the homeowner who's downhill of a farm that's 100 acres. It's covered with panels, and they do not have to do anything for stormwater. I think that would be a disaster. I'd rather take that position and lose in court than not take that position to start. But the smaller panels, again, most mom and pop are not going to have a large enough system to move the needle for something like this.
Yeah, I'm not worried about mom and pop. I think we're fine with mom and pop.
Right.
So yeah, so Longwood would be considered a large installation. They have no stormwater underneath of it. They have no erosion underneath of it. And grass grows. I mean, it grows at the same rate as the field that I was standing in on the other side of the fence. So I'm not seeing this as a I don't see it as a stormwater thing because I haven't seen anywhere stormwater is an issue. So that's my concern is it seems like an unknown still. And so we're going to write an ordinance to say it might be a problem, but we don't know that it is a problem.
Well, I think the idea here is you do want to err on the side of caution. I don't know that necessarily. So I don't know enough about, you mentioned the Longwood installation. I don't know if the Longwood installation is the gold standard of solar array installations, right? So my personal feeling is I would rather err on the side of caution and say it's an unknown, but we might as well protect ourselves. Right. So, I mean, I get your point. Well, are you creating legislation based on a hypothetical situation? But we know stormwater can be an issue, and we may as well, if we have the opportunity, to actually think about doing, putting this in as to err on the side of caution. So that's my take on it. And I think that's the intent of having that in the ordinance is you have the opportunity to protect yourself, you may as well, right?
Except for we are talking about solar panels, which may be protecting us ultimately also. This is a potentially, we could be protecting ourselves and hurting ourselves at the same time.
What you mean, getting people off of fossil fuel, like we're putting in alternative energy sources.
Exactly. Right? Part of our problem with water runoff comes from the use of fossil fuels, and therefore, if you make it difficult to get off of fossil fuels, it's a circular. Yeah, you haven't solved anything. So
I guess my question is, I don't know how much of a burden it is to have someone install. So my take on this is I think that the available land is going to be the biggest impediment to putting in a large commercial solar panel array in Township, and not whether or not we have erosion controls. Because I think one of the problems so if you wanted to promote solar power in Franklin Township, we would have to make our property values a lot lower, because we are a premium. It's very expensive to buy in Franklin Township. So if you're going to be putting in an energy installation, it's going to have to be very large and generate a hell of a lot of electricity to kind of compensate for the cost of the installation, just even if we have erosion control. So I don't know. So my point is, I don't know if erosion control is going to be the limiting factor, right? Asking for erosion control on farmland.
Can I bring up a point? At the end of our discussions of this, we were talking about end of life disposal of the solar panels. Do you remember those discussions?
Yep.
And one of the problems that pops up at end of life, and you can define end of life a couple ways. One way is assuming a panel has a life of 25 years, somebody comes in, removes it, takes it, and it goes away. The other end of life could be from a hailstorm, which punctures the glass surface and water gets in there. At that point, it's no longer a solar panel, it's a hazardous waste, because most solar panels have cadmium, a lot of other heavy metals, which you don't want in the groundwater. And we were just starting to discuss that, I think, when COVID hit and we stopped discussing it. But other states are having problems with that, and that end of life, they've got no place to recycle or dispose of it. And my concern would be is if we put in a large array and we had, let's say, a hailstorm, which we do have at times, and once they get hit and once they get washed to water, those cadmium salts will go right into the ground pretty quickly. Now they can be covered with blue sheeting and stuff like that to protect that, but California is having some issues with this because the federal government refers to use solar cells as hazardous waste. as a result, California can't move them across state lines. Likewise, Pennsylvania wouldn't be able to move across state lines. So we've got no recycle centers. I looked at our local landfill. They'll take solar panels from a homeowner, but they won't take them. They won't take a truckload of them. So I don't know how to answer that. We were just starting to get into that at the time. And I'm just going to bring that up as another headache potentially.
So that's kind of mind-boggling, John, because if you're a commercial outfit, one of the things we did talk about was making sure that we have in some sort of escrow account. So if something does go sideways with one of these commercial units, they have some money to actually dispose of the equipment, right? And what I'm hearing you say is, well, even if they did have the money to dispose of the equipment, they won't have any place to put it.
That's the problem, because in California's case, I'll just give you a little background. They have so many solar panels over the last 20, 30 years that some of them, or a good number of them, are starting to see end of life. And California has no facility for recycling solar. They can't really put it into a hazardous landfill because they cost a lot of money. So what they've done is they basically have identified used solar cells as general waste and putting them into specific landfills, hoping at some point there will be a way of recycling those. But right now those landfills are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're kicking the can down the road, but at some point the road's going to end. There's a number of articles about that if you want to look it up. But they're talking about that as potentially high cost for the state of California because they haven't thought about that or made any provisions for it. Now, for us, it's not a big issue because we're not heavy into solar, but at some point it could be. If we had a large array of solar panels and they got broken and that stuff went into the groundwater, getting cadmium out of drinkable water isn't all that easy.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And so what's happening now that these arrays get decommissioned and then they just stay on the land?
No, they're taking them to disposal points, which California has identified, and basically they're just stacking them up. Because the last I read, that was like a year or so ago.
Okay.
Because there's no solar panel recycling facility in this country.
Huh.
So it's a headache. I don't want to discourage it because I think for the landowner, it's not a problem. For our local landfill, I don't think, from what I've read on their website, they don't have a problem with a few solar cells coming in because they capture everything anyways. But for a large quantity, I think they would refuse them. So it's an interesting question, which I don't have any answer for.
So I guess maybe, we need to add an escrow. The escrow questions is already in there, but maybe the an additional note would be, a disposal plan. Right?
I think so.
For a homeowner, you don't need to worry about it. It's small enough, who cares? But
right,
for a large installation, you say, okay, you have this escrow to make sure that if you go out of business, there's some money here for the township to clean it up. But if you decide to decommission the place, what's your disposal plan? Because I think that's a fair question, just particularly in light of the fact that if there is no place to send them, we can't have it be just on the township's dime, even if it is 20 years down the line. So it's a good point.
With the question in that was one question, and the other was when you were talking about if the cadmium starts to leak and we require, without looking on my phone and trying to read it, I think it was if it produces no electricity after 6 months, then they have another 6 months to decommission it and remove it. And are we leaking cadmium that whole year before?
You're not leaking it unless the glass surface is broken.
Right. But, in our climate, it's a good chance that hail or something could.
Yeah, so it's a big unknown. I have a friend out in Hawaii, and they had solar cells put on their apartment complex. And the provider came in with a price, but then the apartment complex association said, no, we want a price which includes removal of these things, guaranteed removal, and an escrow. And of course, the price went up dramatically, and somebody is managing the escrow. The problem they still have is if they remove them, they have no place to put them. So I don't know what that picture is going to look like in 5 or 10 or 15 years.
I think it's take back to the Board of Supervisors about an actual plan in addition to the escrow.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good note.
Going back to the Longwood example and what we consider individual solar energy system, I wonder under our ordinance whether that Longwood would be an individual property solar energy system. If they're using that for their own, to decrease their demand on public electric.
I think
That
it
would-
goes back to how much they generate. So there's the limit is there's a specific amount of wattage that you have to generate. And if you generate over X amount of electricity, it has to be put into the system, and you're considered a power generator rather than somebody who's just doing it for their own needs. So I think it depends on the scale and how much power they're generating.
Dave, if I can add to that, I think the original version had that, but then after some internal discussions, I think we scrapped, and the version we have now does not have I'll say a megawatt. That's probably not the right term, threshold.
Yeah.
You could have an industry. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, go ahead.
I think you could have an industry, like a cement plant, a quarry, people that have a lot of acreage and that consume a lot of electricity. There's a place up here in Berks County, UGI, off of 222, has a huge, big tank facility. Just built a monstrous precast or cast in place concrete tank. They've put up, I probably think 5 to 10 acres of solar panels over the past few years. They have the property. They're probably just using that to defray their costs. So you have a large land user or a large land holder and has a big facility. So, that is, as long as they're not selling back to Med Ed per se or whatever PPL on the average over the course of the year, you could have these large installs that are not really meant. But when you take a pure 100-acre farm that has no other use on it, and they're putting 70, 80 acres of panels on it, obviously that is just purely for generating electricity at that point. The farmer himself is not using that.
Right, so Longwood would be similar to that concrete plant.
I would
I mean-
agree with you. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know the
Do they
specifics,
have
but that's my guess. They're a pretty big facility.
Longwood doesn't own those panels. I think this goes back to a few years ago. I was in a discussion about that. And I think they leased out that land, and I think it's to Pico, but I'm not sure who. But they don't own the panels. They use the electricity that's generated by those, I think winds up going to Longwood. But the facility itself is owned by a utility of some sort. And I think it's a major utility.
Yeah, it's probably not Pico. I learned that Pico can't actually generate power. They can only
Okay,
distribute
then
it.
some
Yeah.
power generating company, but I don't know which one it is. But apparently Longwood has an agreement with a company, and they've leased the land, but the equipment and the management of
Yeah.
it belong to some company.
So that
Yeah.
probably that
Yeah, I
answers the
appreciate
question.
that,
Right?
but yeah, I appreciate that, but given our ordinance, if we had a Longwood type facility or a concrete plant in Franklin, I understand that they would be an individual.
Mm. Well, the Longwood installation sounds like a commercial installation that is that Longwood is getting some power from. It's not a private installation. It would be similar to a private landowner going to a commercial entity and saying, hey, I'll lease this property for you to put in the solar panels, which would then fall under a major producer, right? A commercial.
Yeah,
producer.
so sorry, let's get away from Longwood then. Let's say Paradox is now Mondavi East.
Okay.
And we are just making so much wine and we can put enough solar panels to defray our electrical costs. We would be an individual producer, individual system.
Yeah. Would you have enough land to do that? I know it's a hypothetical, but just
Right.
to put it, just because you would be one of the major landowners in the township. So if I'm Mr. Solar Panel Company and I would say, okay, Mondavi East, we're going to take care of your power needs. Like, how much land would you have to gobble up to do it? Would it be a reasonable thing?
I don't think it's if you're doing it to defray your costs, you still cover as much land as you can, but you still,
Yeah.
if it's 100 kilowatts and you can decrease it by 50 by putting solar panels on all of your acreage, except for those 2 acres that you need to have grapes on. You could still have somebody putting in an individual system with our
Yeah.
ordinance,
Dave,
even
I
if it
will agree.
satisfies % of their needs.
Right, I would agree, Dave. That's the intent for large landowners that have a large production facility, whatever that is, wine, cement, quarry, it doesn't matter to me. They put in a system to defray their costs. I mean, you could easily show the energy bills of how much you use and how big your system is. It'll be pretty easy to know out of the gate for somebody who knows that lingo and is an electrical guy to know what you're doing or not doing. So it
Right.
makes sense. So, but yeah, so the intention is, unless you guys want to change that, you would be the individual system for Paradox, I would say.
So let me understand this. So if it's an individual system, regardless of what size it is, the structure doesn't matter. But if it's for energy for sale, the structure matters, regardless of what size it is. I think we missed the boat on that.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the intent, the impact, we use commercial installation. That's a good point, because we use the term commercial installation as the same as a large installation, right? So we don't care if a commercial installation is one panel on some guy's roof. We think of commercial installations as large installations. So if that's not explicit, that needs to be explicit when we talk about commercial versus private installations.
I appreciate and I agree with the philosophy of allowing the landowner to use their land as best they see fit. And if that's producing, electric to defray their needs from external electric. And if the Board of Supervisors is willing to accept some of those larger potential systems because they're individual systems in the interest of giving the landowner the opportunity to best use their land, then I'm not going to argue with it. But I do think as a planning commission, and we do want to be concerned about runoff. And then also if these large installations can be decommissioned, even if they're individual systems.
Yeah, the decommissioning is a problem even for a rooftop, isn't it? I mean, it is.
It is, but as John had mentioned, our local landfill will handle small rooftop installations. It's these large arrays that they just don't have the capacity to deal with.
Right.
So, but you're right. There's still issues there. So can you refresh my memory about how we establish impervious surfaces on for landowners. I know that there's we do control how much impervious surface you can put on a land, which was, that's one of the things that we think about in terms of storm runoff. Would that apply to a large solar panel array? Right. I mean, I think the last time we talked about this, and I guess it was pre-COVID, it was 2 years ago. I think we said that solar panel arrays were semi-permeous. Is that how we came?
I thought we resolved that it was not.
Not pervious.
Yeah.
So it'd be the same as putting in.
No, that it was not impervious.
It was not impervious.
Right. So water, so we, at the last conversation we had was that the water would soak into the ground underneath of the panels if the panels were installed with the
Right.
gaps in between and what we were discussing.
Okay.
But sounds like Pete has changed his mind.
Yeah, I will say yes. There's that FAQ from DEP that will tell you, here's where we land on stormwater. And on I'll just ignore the mom and pops, the small scale stuff for somebody's home, and certainly mounted on the roof is a non-issue. The concern obviously is a ground mount system, no matter what its size. At mom and pop, it's a pretty small thing to deal with. But on the larger scales, again, I'm just worried about the 100-acre farm, the person who lives at the downhill side, and all that runoff coming down, because it's just changing the characteristic of that flow, at least in my opinion. So I'm bucking DEP with that. But as Dave indicated earlier, I'm thinking to be conservative on that side is a better position to take at this point for the large scale systems.
So when we talk about putting additions on and paving and adding driveways and whatnot, we talk about the percentage of impervious surface that you're adding to somebody's property. If Mondavi East decides to put in the solar panel array, would that start to limit what they can do? Right. So with that, all of a sudden, we don't need a new ordinance. We'll just look at their the amount of impervious surface they're putting on the land and say, okay, they need 10 acres of solar panels. That's 10 acres of impervious surface, but they can't do it.
Yeah, that ties into a zoning requirement, perhaps for building / lot coverage,
Right.
that we have to cross-reference for that day. But yes.
Okay. So I think that's where we can control what commercial. That's where we can control a resident who wants to put in a commercial scale solar panel array. What I said that as a statement, but I really meant that as a question. Would that be correct?
I'll say philosophically, I agree with you. I think
Okay.
what we should do is take a look at an example, any landowner USA here in Franklin that has 100 acres in an ag district, which is where you'd think this would come up, or perhaps another district, and just kind of look at those numbers a little bit to see what that would entail.
Okay.
Yep, Pete, does anyone have a value for runoff for solar panels? Similar to, so we have runoffs for woods, we have runoffs for fields, we have runoffs for parking lots, etc. Does anyone publish a engineering number that you would apply?
I don't know that I've seen that. If you go with DEP right now, I'm going to say, Chuck, they consider them impervious. Pervious in the sense that you've got all these gaps and everything else. But I don't look at it that way, because you're just changing that characteristic. The panels are never spaced properly. And you can imagine they're the size of a small shed, and then you put 1,000 sheds up, it's going to change the characteristic of the runoff. It's just how I look at it.
So the next step, my next question would be, would you feel comfortable coming up with a number?
Well, I think the numbers, I'm going to say right now, no. I would just consider it just impervious and go with 0.95, depending on the method you're going to use, and just consider it just like asphalt or any other impervious surface. It has the same value for consideration.
Isn't that doesn't that require a huge amount of stormwater?
Yes.
So isn't the reality it's somewhere in between and maybe on the low side? And that sounds like a pretty aggressive. Am I wrong?
Well, it depends. Again, it's going to be hard to come up with if you're putting this on a perfectly flat site, might do something. If you're putting it on a very steep slope, it could be another answer. You know, how that runoff is going to be impacted, and the concept, again, trying to manage it on your own property. It goes back to really recontouring the land where you want to not have to do too much in order to be able to put this back, and have to, when you decommission the panels, which we've understand from John is already a serious problem, you've then got this cost to redo the landscape there. So if you have all this infrastructure, the concept that was discussed is not so much pipe and inlets, but just surface swales and like regional basins. And again, going with this cadmium discussion, perhaps having some way to capture runoff if it is somewhat hazardous is not a bad thing. Maybe you have a yearly inspection done on these things to make sure the panels aren't fractured. So there's some things we could come up with. But again, I'm open, Chuck, to some. It depends if we can be generic in what we want for the stormwater versus specific parameters, and then whoever designs that site is very site specific, more like a performance criteria.
I think what I'm afraid that we're doing is now we're creating data, right? I don't know if we're in a position to decide what the impervious or pervious nature of solar panels are. I think we kind of have to either side on the air of caution, right, and take Pete's advice, which I'm leaning toward to say we're going to consider them impervious, and then, you know, unless there's another governing body around solar panels that, you know, we feel is a better assessment, then we can take that. But I don't want to start creating our own rules.
The state of Pennsylvania. Pete just said that they consider it to be pervious. Correct?
They could, which I don't know if I agree. Well, I believe that is I think that's too loose. I think that's too far on the other end, right? I mean, if you're gonna put, if you put a, you know, for a small installation, Chuck, yeah, you know, if you get 10 solar panels and you're running your house, you're not going to be causing a huge runoff. But if you have, you know, 100,000 panels on several acres, you can't tell me that's the same as having nothing there. I mean,
I can tell you because the state of Pennsylvania told me so. So I have some pretty good authority behind me when I say,
but you know that's
not a problem.
True. But Chuck, you know that's not true. That you're putting a roof over your land and then saying, yeah, that roof doesn't exist. I mean, that's clearly,
no, I don't think you're going to convince me on this, but because something appears to make sense doesn't mean it makes sense.
You're right. That's fair. That is fair.
I'm assuming that the state of Pennsylvania has done some testing also, in addition to just standing out there and saying, yeah, we think. So
I don't know.
So that's where, yeah, and you said an authority. There's a pretty good authority.
So can I ask a question? Okay, so I'm trying to envision this. All right, so if you lay out the panels, say, going downhill, because you're on a south-facing slope, and you're basically, for the sake of my argument, I will say that you're contour farming the panels. So they're following the curves of the hill roughly. And that grass can grow under these panels as they do at Longwood. So it seems to me that one of these panels, from looking at the pictures, might cover an area that's about 8 feet in width on the ground. Not, you know, it's angle, but it's protecting an area 8 feet on the ground. It's going to focus 8 feet of rain to the bottom edge of that panel. But for the rest of the downhill slope, it's going to be traveling over a grassy surface. So you lose the 8 feet, but otherwise it's following the grassy slope downhill, as it would have had there been no panels there. And this is happening for every set of panels as it goes downhill. So on this sense, I sort of, see Chuck's point. But if you range those panels so that they climb up the side of a slope in the way people farmed in the bad old days, so that the water can run downhill through the furrows, then what's going to happen is the panels are going to focus the water to travel directly downhill in a narrow stream rather than a broad stream. And so to some degree, the imperviousness of the panels actually depends upon how they're aligned.
So that's a good point. So maybe the answer is, so I think what Pete was saying was, let's have it, put them in as impervious, and then if a commercial entity wants to come in, we can, if they feel that we're wrong, they can challenge us. Is that what you're saying, Pete?
Yeah, there's obviously, that would be something that would be, I'm going to say we can put ultimately, this isn't this is kind of a new section. So it's something that could be, I believe, waivable in some way under the stormwater criteria. Now we're going to have a new Act 167 coming out, which we're going to talk about a little bit. And I don't know where that decision will ultimately go in the months to come,
Okay.
But stormwater is always something specific of itself that could be waived. So we could have a criteria. We go with a conservative approach, which I'm going to stand on at this point. I hear Chuck's and Paul's point for certain points on that, which is good. But they can always come in with a specific site-specific plan and say, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we think, and try to prove it otherwise.
Pete, I did a search on Google a few minutes ago, and I found something. It says solar panels are considered a disconnected impervious surface when water running off a panel is discharged to a pervious surface, for example, turf, crop, perennial vegetation. Now, this is a Minnesota interpretation. So it looks like it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, all I can tell everyone is stormwater is the root of all evil in every municipality. And I think everybody's shaking their heads with that. So I really feel we need to be conservative on this. And
I think I agree with you, because what I like is it's a stop. It's like, a commercial entity wants to come in. They see Franklin Township as a very attractive place to build their solar panel. And we have this ordinance in here that forces them to come to the board and have this conversation. Right.
Yep.
And getting a waiver isn't generally a cost prohibitive, action. I don't think it costs a whole lot of money from anybody. So it's easy to do that and come in with a reasonable explanation of why or why not you think these solar panels will fit in this land. So
the commercial would have to go through conditional use. So I think there's opportunity in that conditional use for what we're talking about. Would it be, Pete?
yeah, that's before the board. So I think that's why we kept it at that level versus the zoning hearing board, because if at the zoning hearing board, the supervisors can offer input, they're not the decision maker. So the conditional use allows the board of supervisors to have that, and there could be various conditions put on that, just like with any project that is doing good. But again, we'll go back to here's a farmer trying to generate additional income, and his only value, or the only thing he's got, is tons of land, and he's trying to be able to make up another crop in a sense. It just happens to be harvesting the sun.
What he already does.
It's true.
Uh,
So, yeah, just real quick, there's a book that we built our vineyard on called Sunlight into Wine, and talks about the whole trellis working as a solar panel. But I won't go too far down that path. Dave, with our discussion, let's take a break here. And do you feel we have some comments that we should just stop and go back to the board with? At this point, I toss out, I'm going back 2 decades, but there used to be a time when we had joint meetings. And whether this is something that might be more efficient to have a meeting between the Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission instead of bouncing this back and forth. Or
yeah, I'm not opposed to that at all. I don't see. I think that's a good way of doing it, because I think we have some good notes now, but I think it's worthwhile having this conversation in front of the rest of the board, or whatever board majority wants to partake in it. But yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a good idea. There's no reason not to have it. I don't know, Jeff, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't have this discussion with the board.
No, Dave's exactly right. We used to have joint meetings eons ago, so we could certainly do that and advertise it. And, if that's what the planning commission would like.
I'm not saying I'm looking for any more meetings, but I just, the complexity of this is that we're putting in provisions that we don't know what the answers are to them. Like how to decommission something 20 years from now.
Yeah.
That's where I'm having a bigger hang up on that than I am the stormwater.
So would you rather discuss it at the November meeting, December meeting, or think of a special meeting?
I think, I think those combined meetings used to be, we didn't have 3 meetings those months. We still just had 2 meetings. And whether, we commit to coming to a board meeting when it's not looking like it's too much on the agenda. Because I think we all anticipate that this is not going to, if we put more people in the room, we're going to have a longer conversation than we just had tonight.
I think if we want to just have it at the next PC meeting, that might be worthwhile, right? I mean, usually we have one topic to discuss, right? It's not like there's
Right.
We usually have a huge I mean, I'm not opposed to it, and I don't think, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I think it makes sense to just have this conversation and let everybody express their concerns, and we can move on.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to have the school plan by next meeting. I would not think so. And maybe Yori's meeting. Jeff, do we know of anything? Will we have anything with the 160, what is it, 167, Pete, by next meeting that we have to be going over anything?
We're going to go into that topic. There's going to be, I think it's going to be yes, based upon the schedule that they've put out, which seems very unrealistic to me for this 167, but it is what it is.
But let's get it on our next PC meeting. Everybody in agreement with that?
Or
Yeah.
So Jeff, I guess from you, what we could do, I don't know if we want to, I mean, we don't need to have a big discussion at a board meeting. It might just be something that you can pull the board via
Oh,
email
yes.
and just say, hey, the PC has, brought up some discussions and just want to have a combined meeting. and discuss
Perfect.
it so we can finalize it. So
Is
Yeah,
there any trouble with sunshine and having
No.
more than 2 supervisors at a planning commission meeting?
no, because they're public meetings. It's a public meeting and it's advertised. So I don't see why there wouldn't be. The only time there's a sunshine infraction is if it's a private meeting with if it's not an exec session, right? So anything that's not an exec session that isn't public or publicized, we can't have more than 3.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not a sunshine issue if it's publicized.
I want to go back to Dave and Mark a minute for Sunshine and Vineyards. Is that a book you guys wrote?
Sunlight, yeah, Sunlight into Wine, Richard Smart, Australian that studied at Cornell.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask for a signed copy next month, but okay.
All right. So I'll send the invitation out to the board to attend the next planning commission meeting for this subject.
Yeah, there might be some controversy, but we'll fight through it.
Well, I was a big mouth on this one, but we don't know how to address what was sent to us without knowing what the intention is.
I agree with you. I don't think you were a big mouth. I think you brought up some really excellent points. So, and I agree. I think it's a completely reasonable request to have this combined meeting, and I am sure at least 3 supervisors will attend. So that'll be the quorum, and we'll be able to, get this done. So hopefully all 5 of us will attend.
All right, should we move on?
Sure.
Act 167, Pete.
All right, thank you. In the package you guys got, and I'm just going to try to do a high level overview here because we could spend days on this, but I don't think we're there yet. In the package you got that Jeff put together, he penned in an outline October 28th regarding the Chester County Model Ordinance. So the first thing there is just it gives you an overview of timeline of what's happening tomorrow. And you should have a link to this. I think Melissa had put it out to you guys. There's a committee meeting tomorrow with the county to kind of go over the final draft ordinance. There's a copy of the draft ordinance available online. Theoretically that goes okay tomorrow, and then it's out there. They're going to go out for public comment. We'd have to do some legwork in there. For those of you that were around before, we went through and you could read over the comments, and then you forward those comments officially up to DEP and the county, and we see whether they listen to that or not. Ultimately, they make a submission to DEP. January is what they're looking for, and then March or April is when the county adopts it. Now, I think this timeline sucks, quite honestly, with Thanksgiving, hunting season, Christmas, COVID, and all those other holidays, New Year's in this timeline, but I didn't make this timeline. So that's at least where they want to go. Once the county adopts it, it then comes to you. And for those that have been through this process before, there's this various, we'll have editor comment sections where you can pick different things for the stormwater thresholds that you want to set, things like that. So in a nutshell, as far as we know, they are keeping the general thresholds the same. Under 1,000, you don't do anything. 1,000 to 2,000 square feet is the simplified approach, and 2,000 and up is the engineered approach. The simplified approach, they are changing. They are making it, it's still simplified in the sense that you don't have to hire somebody, but they are making the quantity and how you do, or the math behind it, a bit different. I think that just results in a bigger infiltration bed at the end of the day and costs a little more money to build, but it's still just as quick to do. The real change they seem to be making is they only want infiltration beds. You may recall in the current version, they give you half a dozen options to pick from. For some reason, they don't like those options anymore. You're only going to be able to do an infiltration bed. Dig a hole, line it with some fabric, clean stone, cover it back up, connect your roof leaders. If you want to deviate from that, you still can, but now you are kicked out of the simplified approach. So they're pushing that. I don't think there's any real change for farmers as far as I can tell. I would like to get, and I'm trying to get clarification on how they look at that impervious area for it, but they have 15,000 square feet where they're allowed to use simplified approach to cover bigger ag barns and things like that. So that's kind of the nutshell version. If you've been through this before, you know the drill. If you're new to it, it's going to be quite voluminous, but that's what's coming down the pike. So right now you don't have to do a thing. They'll have this meeting tomorrow. The model ordinance is going to come out. So we will work to come up with some, reading through that again and again to come up with some good questions. There could be some dialogue that you guys have. If you get a chance to read it, ultimately it would be, we'd see, I think, at the December Planning Commission meeting, we would have a list of kind of questions that we would foster up. You guys could agree with them, maybe be non-committal on them, and you may have some of your own questions you want answered. We could see that list going to the Board of Supervisors for the December meeting. And I know, Dave, you're hearing this for the first time. And then, because you're going to get a presentation later this month on the Act 167 a bit too. And then those comments could formally go back, assuming the board's okay with that, would go back to the county, and we'll see what they do with them. They may like it, they may not, who knows? So with that said, I'll just sit back for a minute and see what you all think of that.
Pete, first question for you is 1,000, are we still working on cumulative, or did they sort that out?
The cumulative, that's a good question. The start date for that is going to be 2013.
So anything that was done before 2013 does not count, but going forward from 2013, everything counts?
Right. So I'm guessing if you build a house in 15 and you got something and then you added to it, you're stuck. And that's one of the things to clarify when you're in the engineered approach. You're the second homeowner who bought something and you just want to put up a shed that's 500 square feet. You get stuck in the engineered approach. That's a world of hurt when you're just trying to put up a shed and your design costs 3 times as much as the shed, let alone the construction costs. That's the reality problem of that one.
So no, they haven't really fixed it.
No, so I think the cumulative approach is a big deal that we have to clarify. It just, so yes, that's something we definitely have to look at, but I'm still not happy with what they have. Because their approach by the numbers is once you're in the engineered approach, you're stuck in it forever. And that's very impractical.
And everybody will end up there.
Yep. So from using this as from a day-to-day standpoint, I don't know how many of you, some of you have maybe had a stormwater project and you've been able to use the simplified. So you may have some real life experiences for that. Some of the questions we'll have with infiltration testing, are they mandates? Are they not? When do you have to do that? I also want to make sure the conservation district approves E&S plans above 5,000 square feet. We get a lot of pushback on that for some reason, but that's what the rules are. And I think they need to do that. They also have this weird thing with the simplified approach, or a new aspect. I shouldn't say it's weird, that's wrong. Where they only want roof water going into these infiltration beds. And the problem is, well, what happens when you add driveways to it? You got to be able to do something. So there's I think the practical things of working through. If you're a big engineered project, it really is not going to have any effect. So I think the important takeaways for me are to try to look at the impact of the simplified approach on mom and pop, and also from an agricultural standpoint for the farmers. Those are the two things that you guys control near and dear as the township. The other, excuse me, the other item is your thresholds. Right now, you're under 1,000. You don't have to do anything. That 1 to 2,000 gets you, you can put up a bigger pole barn and still be in that. The 2,000 above is anybody who's typically building a house and a driveway. You're done. You're in the engineered approach. So if you wanted to adjust those thresholds and go one way or the other, you can. Some places go down to 500 square feet as the trigger. I think I kind of like where you guys are now, but you may have an opportunity to change that if you wanted to.
So am I understanding this correctly? If you wanted to put a shed at the end of your driveway and you wanted to also add a little bit of driveway in front of that shed, you would need to have 2 different stormwater solutions?
Potentially, just because of they only want, I think it's roof water, and obviously a driveway is not roof water. So I think you may have to have 1 for 1 and then a stone trench along the edge of the driveway. But the practical side of this has to be thought through a little bit. So it's still, we're just trying to understand this. I think everybody is in the same boat. But they've got away from all these, they don't want rain gardens. So we're going to have somebody who has a rain garden already on their property and they want to expand the rain garden. And it's going to be, well, why can't we? It's like, well, the book says we can't. So I would hope there's some discretion that they would allow for certain situations that exist, or somebody who already built something else. Why can't we work with that? So they have their reasons as to why they've made these changes, but that's, how this goes. So similar to coming up with an example for a 100-acre farm for solar panels and how we think that works from a zoning standpoint and a stormwater standpoint, it's again rethinking some of this with a mom and pop with a small shed, the prefab shed that comes and gets dropped off. You got the person who puts up a 2 or 3 car pole barn with a little bit of driveway expansion, and then you have the new house and the farmer. Those are the 4 typical scenarios. I think we have to put our mindset in and then see how this really works for the ordinance to make sure everything is going the way the board wants it to work for their constituents.
All right, sounds exciting.
Yes. So as soon as we know something, what we can do is we can throw the model ordinance or a link to that. It's already out there, but I assume there'll be some final version that we can send around to everybody, the PC and the board. There'll be some highlight with that. So a lot more. It's just unfortunate the timing of this meeting relative to the meeting tomorrow. I know John Auerbach has zoomed in on those meetings at the county level. Maybe some other people have, but I know he was there on that, and he had some concerns about the simplified approach. So if you get a chance and have some time tomorrow, it may be worth tuning in a little bit and learn. But we'll certainly keep in contact with Jeff for distributing information as it becomes available, and have an outline, I'll say, prepared for the December meeting, so we can add. And if it's good if the board's in on that too, perhaps, Dave, because you're involved in that 167 as much as the Planning Commission too. So it'll pull double duty for the December PC, I think.
Pete, are they taping it?
I don't know if it's like they recording like your meetings. I would hope so, but I'm not sure.
Because that would probably be real useful if we could get it, the taped version. People could watch it at their leisure.
Jeff, would you have an ability? I know you have that link that I forwarded to you and Melissa. Is there a way that if you zoomed at the township, just in a background sense, you could record that Zoom?
Well, I'm going to be on a board meeting tomorrow, recording it tomorrow afternoon. So, and I've got court in the morning for Hess Mill Bridge.
Okay. Is there some way somebody can? And I'm just asking the question. I'm not the tech wizard. Can anybody just record a Zoom?
What time is it, Pete?
I don't have, I thought it was 9 to 11. I'd have to check that email. I can pull that up on my phone, I think. Hang on. Or you would have it also there too, Jeff, I think. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, it's 9 to 11 tomorrow. Yeah, it's Chesco, it's Chester County Water Resource Authority. So again, the page here, unfortunately, Chuck doesn't tell me if it's going to be recorded. It is via Zoom, but that's and in person.
So Zoom, you can't record it if they don't allow you to, but you can if they
Right.
do allow you to.
Okay.
So once again, that doesn't really answer the question. I mean, that
Yeah, sorry.
we're still stuck in the same question.
Yep.
They should, I mean, they really should record it, I would think. There's
I
no
would
reason
hope
for them
too.
not to.
So we'll have Jessica there, and again, she kind of handles we have a dozen municipalities between MS4, 167 stuff. So she'll be attending the other meetings as they come up. She's more versed in this, in some of the detail than I am, but I know enough at this point to be quite dangerous, I think.
So she's gonna be watching tomorrow?
Yeah, she will be attending that. Yeah.
If you could just ask her if there's a way for her to get a copy, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I'll text her right now. You
Okay.
got it.
All right. I think that was it as far as agenda items. Any public comment? Any public? Any discussion?
I just wanted to ask about the digital book. No one seemed to complain. Can we move forward with that with the planning commission?
Absolutely.
And then
I'm
we're more than happy to print plans if you want them. I get that.
I'm fine with it.
I did okay with it today myself, so let's stay with what we have.
Yep, it's gonna save the staff a lot of time and the township money.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I found some important things in our discussion. So we'll adjourn at 8:47.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.